show, we have Alex Louie of StorySpark. Whether it's art versus science or digital versus analog, Alex Louie is a creative designer who found himself continually juxtaposing themes, finding and creating visual stories, and eventually led him to co-found StorySpark, a boutique graphic t-shirt brand that promotes positive living through blending of technology and art metaphors. Trained as a print design graphic designer, Alex quickly jumped into the digital world as a user interface designer at various digital agencies and corporate properties. Having worked in numerous web and mobile projects for Fortune 500 companies, he developed a strong sense of empathy for digital product consumers. Wanting to greater impact and consumers, he shifted his focus towards creating more personal designs. Through his brand, StorySpark, Alex now uses his passion for art and technology as spark towards creating unique visual designs on physical products, all to tell a unique perspective and help others spark connections.
Welcome to another episode of Origins. Thank you so much for being here, Alex. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored and humbled to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We are honored and humbled to have you. And we'd love to ask you to share with us the start of your creative journey. Please tell us your origin story.
Great. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. Yeah. So I'm Alex, co-founder of StorySpark. We're a small artisan boutique graphic t-shirt and art accessories brand. And my origin story, like many creatives, I kind of, all started back in childhood. I have to say that, when I do look back on childhood, it often brings back, very fond memories, for the most part, at least. And I would say that I was always been influenced and inspired by, toys, video games, comic books, much of the cool visual media that's been out there. So that's always influenced my direction and overall perspective on life. And then I'd say that I didn't really get into the making of art and graphics until later on, like in high school. That's kind of where I started to kind of experiment with different media, whether it was like drawing or painting and whatnot. But most of the time, I never really considered myself as an artist or creative at that point. I always was more of like a science and math nerd, a band kid too, which is all good. That's all cool. But it was something that I always thought myself as a person who would get into the sciences and was more of a logical thinker and kind of suppress some of that creativity, at least at that point in time. I went on to college and stuff. I was actually a chemistry major. It was something that I would have to say I was actually pretty good at and kind of enjoy the abstract and a very logical thinking behind it. But at a certain point, I kind of realized that it's probably not something that I want to do on a day-to-day basis. I really didn't really see myself behind like in a lab or doing a lot of research and whatnot. So I kind of took the time, in those developing years to kind of like do some soul searching, see who I am, as a person and what really inspired me. And I took some time off, studied abroad, went to China for a year, studied culture and art over there as a kind of a foray, into where I'm going now. And then I just decided to, at one point, just make a big pivot and go to art school. So I went to California Institute of the Arts, or otherwise known as CalArts, and studied graphic design. So I was there, learned just a ton of things, just about the industry, about being an artist, a designer, and then just finding a way to be able to express myself, express ideas in a visual manner. It was something that really kicked my butt. Many all-nighters, a lot of tears, sweat and tears, I guess. And it was a good time. I learned a lot, but I wish I embraced more of the other arts as well. But I was like so heavily focused, tried to do the best that I could. And then just, put in the hours, and eventually, I came out with a degree and then I started my early career. At that time, it was around the dot-com era, and pushed myself through I did work at many different digital agencies. At that time, it was considered as a GUI designer, the graphic graphical user interface designer. I did a lot of website designs, app designs, marketing, logos, many things like that. So it was all cool stuff. It was an exciting time in my life and in the career. The whole industry was changing. It was considered new media at the time too. So it was all good. A lot of corporate work, which was challenging in many regards. As a creative, again, trying to build upon that self-expression and trying to make messages creative and interesting to whether it's like trying to express the brand or express some sort of message. It was always a great challenge. But the thing is like after a certain point, I started to get through to this burnout stage. So it's something that, I really needed to define myself again. So it was something I've kind of noticed, as I was kind of reflecting upon my journey, is that there were many like pivot points in the process. So from like going from science to art, and now from going from like corporate to going to more of an entrepreneurial space, which is kind of where I'm at now. So after many years of working in like the digital agencies, consulting, I did some work in-house as well. And then I just decided that it's probably a good time to try to do something on my own. So, use everything that I've learned, everything that has inspired me in the past, and then just try to create my own brand. That's what became a Story Spark. So for this whole Story Spark venture it's a brand that's inspired by art and technology. So my wife's son and I, founded it, and this is actually going to be our 9th year. And so we create all these different designs that are art and tech inspired, influenced by pop culture. And we just we have fun with it. We go to different events, Decon, definitely one of our favorites. We go to street fairs and then just other like pop-up markets and such. And it's been a great experience. It's been something that has been very challenging, of course, as a small business and as a creative, but it's been very satisfying because we meet all sorts of people and we see, and for some reason, the work resonates. I'm very thankful for that and just, appreciate it. And so I just keep on trucking along, keep on going. That's pretty much the journey, at least at this point.
That's awesome. I'm going to pop right in because I was just sort of struck at how similar our journeys were. Like I actually went to undergrad for chemical engineering and then quickly decided that was not for me. And then I pivoted and went to art school too. So I was like, I know it. And I started as graphic design, but I sort of went off the rails a little bit earlier and went into fine art pretty quickly. I was like, ooh, this design stuff, this is too technical for my liking. I need to throw paint on canvases. So, but I was like, wow, that, it's cool to hear just, your own story kind of reflected. And that's partially why we love talking to so many people to bring to light all of these other similarities and other journeys that I think a lot of creatives have. And so you mentioned the challenges of running your own brand. And what would you say the greatest challenge for you is, at least right now, in terms of running your own clothing and apparel brand?
There's so many challenges, right? But I would just have to say that probably the biggest challenge is really myself. Like a lot of the times I do find myself a little bit hesitant or fearful of trying something new. Not sure if it's going to work, a little bit of fear of failure. That's always been something that it's like the little devil on your shoulder. You have to swat it away at times, but for some reason it pops up once in a while. And the thing is, I'm very thankful for my wife, who is a partner who she just really motivates me and kind of keeps pushing me to like, you got to try something, you got to like do something here. And I'm very thankful to have someone who I can spring ideas off and has my back as well.
That's beautiful. Oh man, I want to ask so many questions, and we're gonna today. That's beautiful, and I think a lot of creative people have that issue. So I like that how you talk about it. Imposter syndrome. I think a lot of creative people have it, and I love to delve into it more. It's that little devil that's stopping you and needing that, like your wife, to be on the other shoulder telling, go away, right? Can you give some examples, if it's okay, of how your wife motivates that internal person in you to beat that imposter syndrome?
I would say that like there's many points where I'm just like, just not sure of things, or whether it's like creating a new design or going to a different event, or you're trying a new market or something like that, right? So I'm often very like skeptical, not quite sure, and there's a little bit of analysis paralysis sometimes. But oftentimes having her there to kind of like get different ideas or a different perspective, and then also just being an encouraging voice to say that you can do this. This is something that could be worthwhile. We do have to take risks sometimes to make progress. So we just have to kind of embrace that and just take the next step. And just kind of, sometimes it's almost like ignorance is bliss in a way. You just have to go for it. You have to dive in and then figure it out at that point. So yeah, I would say that that's sometimes, not all the times it happens, but sometimes that's the way it works.
The reason it's interesting to me, mine is my wife too. Like, I wouldn't be here without her being that opposite one, like pushing me and making me feel confident in my stuff. And so I find some great similarities in it, speaking personally, but sometimes my wife is way off. And I love her, and she's not in the room, so I can get away with this now. How do you deal with the conflicts and making the right choices and when to listen and not to listen and that whole process?
I would say there's no real science behind it. It's just sometimes it is like a gut feeling, and then sometimes it's just like how much do you trust what you've done so far, and kind of make an analysis in terms of, yeah, that would make sense. Okay, let's just do it, right? And there's other things where we try to like make it as scientific as we can, whether it's like if it's based on previous experiences or previous data, and then try to make decisions in that way. But oftentimes it's not readily available. So we just do have to kind of just go with the gut instinct at times. And just like, sometimes there's a crash and burn situation. It's like, okay, well, let's not do that again.
I love your point about trying to make decisions from as rational a perspective as possible while acknowledging that sometimes the information isn't there to make those very scientifically calculated moves and stuff like that. And so kind of given this, I'm hearing that you've over the years, and I think this is true of a lot of creative entrepreneurs, especially, is the ability to sit with that uncertainty, sit with the tension of not knowing whether or not a specific event is going to pan out or if a new line is going to take off. And so what keeps you going, knowing that this is so uncertain, knowing that there's very little control I think we have over the outcome of things? What motivates you to keep your brand alive and to keep going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would have to say that it comes from a couple different places. Like, first of all, it comes like from within. It's a lot of it is about personal growth. As I was just describing with my own creative journey, is that like, what is that next step? I always ask myself, what is that next step? And that's something that definitely pushes me, that question of like, where am I going? I really should have some sort of goal in mind, but and I do to some degree, but it's not black and white, unfortunately, or maybe it is fortunate. Sometimes it's serendipitous. So yeah, the motivating factor behind that is kind of like, it's the question of that unknown. It's like, okay, well, I have to be good with that, but I have to be able to keep growing. I have to keep evolving. So that's definitely one point of motivation. The other point is that, as we've developed the Story Spark brand, for these past 9 years, we have been able to grow our audience. And then I almost feel like I have a sense of responsibility to them to create new designs, for them. I remember specifically there was one point at an event where we had a repeat customer come up to us and say, so what's the new designs, or what have you been doing? We didn't really have anything like really new. And that really like woke us up saying, okay, we got to keep on pushing. We got to keep on, creating. can't just rest on our laurels. That's definitely something that motivates us into, we got to keep on building something that they can be a part of. I feel that sense of responsibility is a little bit of a pressure point, but I think it's a very humbling one too. I'm very grateful and thankful for that. That stuff really keeps us pushing.
I love that you're saying about understanding and knowing an audience. And as always with this podcast, Chris is going to tell a story with a question. How I found you, Alex, is I had some people from Microsoft with me to show them the show. And, they had walked around, and then I was walking around with them, looking with them. And they're like, okay, we got to go back to the Bigfoot guy. And my whole boss kept going, we need the Bigfoot guy. And he kept describing to the other people. And they all went, yeah. So they found you. They were your favorite thing in the show. And they're engineers and they're techies, going back to your whole mixing, pop culture and engineering video games. It really spoke to this group of people, your stuff. And I'm looking at this stuff going, oh my God, I get it. These are his people. Right? And DesignerCon's his people. And so when you said that about the audience, I really, really clicks in my head. So I'd love to delve into when you're designing stuff. Some people say, I don't care about an audience, where you're like, no, I care about the audience. Take me through the thing of creating a new design and creating something that really speaks to these people. And how do you know you found it?
Again, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that makes my day. Yeah, it's just, I guess the process really is, it is really organic. It's, I do have to kind of I have to see what kind of, it goes back to what inspires me, what's going on, in today's world. I always like to grab something from today and pull in some retro themes, from the past, or just try to mash different kind of ironic elements together. It's always kind of harnesses around that. And then if it's something that I like, it still has to be something that I care for and resonates with me personally before I can distribute it and talk about it to the world. Because if I can't stand behind it, then it's hard to really promote it and to really tell a story, right? So, and then a lot of the times when we do release new designs, a new line or something, I'm always super nervous how it's going to be received. There's been somewhere, oh yeah, that's a dud. That didn't really work, but but that's okay. I liked it. I thought it was cool. And then there's others that are just they're instant hits. I'm like, wow, never would have thought. It's always like that, right? It's as a graphic designer, you come up with 3 options. You have your favorite one, you have your their not so favorite one, and then the middle ground. It's always the not so favorite that wins for some reason, right? For some reason, it's so bizarre.
By the way, I hate that one. I'm like, okay, you got to make 3 designs for a customer. This is the one I put my heart and soul into. Okay, this is the crappy one. They'll never pick it. Why did you pick that one?
It never fails for some reason.
Yeah.
Like some sort of law in the universe.
It works against you. And the other thing, I'm going to do a poor job explaining, your designs, I really like. They're simple, but not simple.
That's totally.
So you take this pop culture thing you like, and when you're making them for a t-shirt, your stuff's very simple in line work and color. And I'm wondering, how do you think about that when you got an idea for Bigfoot and taking it to your style?
I guess it comes down to just my overall design aesthetic. I like things that are very simple, very minimal, very clean. But yet there's also another part of me that likes the complicated, the details, the devils in the details. And, when I'm creating something, I like to go in there and finesse little hairs or add a little spark here and there. It's a kind of a blend of different right brain, left brain type of interactions that goes through my mind a lot of the times. Sometimes I do have to pull it back, the complicated part of it back, so that it still stays a little bit more minimal. And then just when it comes to color choices and stuff, I don't want it to be super loud. I like to have a little bit of that retro flair to it. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so I was always been into like, cool graphic tees. I was kind of inspired by some of the like the outdoor brands there. A simple look that you can wear any day of the week. You can put a jacket over it, and still feel cool, right? So
I will say for everyone who is listening to this podcast and they're like, what is Chris talking about? Definitely just go to the website and look at the designs because it will all make a lot more sense. But no, I really like that you have a very specific brand aesthetic, and I can see that mix of the right left brain of the creativity and flourish and details with the simplicity in terms of like shape language and overall clean design, which is really nice. And even among this kind of like very cohesive design, you mentioned that sometimes there's hits, sometimes there's flops, and that's something that you're constantly navigating. How, I think for a lot of people who are just starting out, they may, drop a design or post something on Instagram, and then the reception is not anywhere near what they would want it to be. How do you kind of navigate when you do have those, the quote unquote flops in a collection?
it's a really tough issue, I'm afraid. Something where, I mean, if it just doesn't work out well, then I just have to evaluate it, look at it as closely as possible. I don't know if it's because of like the messaging behind it that's wasn't resonating, or maybe it's like a color treatment that wasn't on the mark. There's a lot of factors involved. Sometimes maybe it's if it's at an event, maybe it's the specific location, like the people at that event don't really care for that type of theme versus, maybe I go to this other part of the city. They just love it. So it's sometimes, I mean, something that isn't really that successful, I still hold on to it and I still have some hope for it. Because then maybe it's just like a certain particular factor that I have to kind of look at and take it to somewhere else. And then, once it sells out, that's it. I'm not going to reprint it again.
Love to pull on this thread more. So, Alex, when you're starting out, let's go back to 9 years ago, and we're gonna get in this apparel business. I got these cool designs. Do you start out with like 5? Do you start out with 1? How do you start? Like, where do you start? Be stupid like me and drop a few $1,000s, and then you know, up to your neck in product that doesn't sell. How do you start?
Say that if you wanted to start your own line, definitely just start out with a finite set of sizes. That was definitely one thing that I didn't really grasp in the beginning, was the difficulty of inventory and sizing for apparel. So for graphic tees, I would definitely start, with like, small to XL, and then, possibly do like just a small run, whether it's like use like a print on demand service, like Printful or Printify or something like that, where you can just get, maybe like 3 units of each size, and then just, take it to different markets and stuff, and kind of see where it goes, see what the reception is. And I would say it's nice to be able to present 3 to 6 different designs rather than just like one design. Because I've found that a lot of the times when people have like a choice, then they're more receptive to actually choosing one versus just like seeing one design only. And then it's either all or nothing. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. And how did you start out in terms of getting yourself out there? Was it mainly signing up for like local craft fairs, or did you do like the Comic Con circuit? Or could you just walk us through maybe those early days of being like, all right, so now I have product. How do I actually sell this out to people?
Oh yeah, it was a funny instance here. It's like, me coming from like a digital marketing kind of tech background, I thought online, right? Online's perfect. I just, set up a Shopify store, designed it as nicely as I could, used a great theme, super clean, got the messaging, got the photography. Say, okay, we're open. That was exactly what it was like. It's like, okay, it's there. I built it and nobody comes. Yeah, so what I didn't realize is there's like a lot to push into online these days. Even back then, it was really difficult. So you got to put in a lot of ads and awareness and different campaigns and whatnot. We did that for about a year or so and saying, this is tough. This is really tough. So we decided, okay, well, let's sign up for like a local craft fair just to see. That was one point where I was very hesitant. I'm a very introverted person. I don't like to go out there and like try to sell. I'm definitely not a salesperson. I said, okay, let's just try it. So we went to a craft fair back in 2016, and I think we sold maybe a dozen shirts, and I was like, oh my god, this is great. This was like incredible. Small wins. And then, we started doing it again, and again. Some were total failures. There was a few that we didn't sell anything. So that was tough to get up from. But then there were others that were like super receptive, and, we were like, very thankful, always grateful. And then eventually we would see repeat customers, and then we would see the shirts in the wild. Somebody's just walking by with it. I was like, oh my god. It's just like the feeling you get when you see like something you created and someone's actually like wearing it is just like, I can't describe that. It's just like amazing. And that was one of the best things of this whole entrepreneur journey that we've been doing. It's just like being able to make a connection to a person, at that very personal individual level. It's just like, wow.
Rick, jump in on this one. I agree. When you see someone wearing your shirt or reading something you created, and you don't even know the person, like you're like, oh, like it's the instant love connection you have with them. And I think, yeah, right. Like it's the big driver for what we do, right?
Definitely, that's one huge motivating factor. It's just being able to make that connection to somebody else, and and sparking some joy or some like laughter or some sort of emotional reaction. It's just like, that's what makes the art so special.
I think there's also something to your point about having a stranger making that connection with someone else, because I remember early on in our artistic career, my wife and I, she's also a visual artist, and I remember I would be very sort of not disappointed, but if she tells me a design is really cool, or like, oh, that painting's great, I'm kind of like, well, you have to say that. We're married. But then when some other person, is like, that's cool, I'm like, yay, it is cool. And I think even though her opinion is actually very valid and she can usually give me pretty good feedback on whether or not a piece is actually good, I think there is something about creating for an audience of people that extend outside that personal nucleus of people who you can tell yourself the story that they have to tell you your work is good. But do you feel like that resonates with you, Alex, at all?
Oh, definitely. 100%. It's something that I guess it's like a form of validation that you're doing something that makes a difference, or like that makes that certain connection and makes somebody else that you really wouldn't have any sort of connection with or any sort of like communication with, suddenly like they're resonating with what you created. It's just like, wow, you didn't have to like really pitch it to them. Kind of something that they gravitated toward, and they actually want to wear it or experience it or whatnot like that. So it's just like, it's such a powerful thing from a human perspective, I guess.
Totally agree. I want to shift a little, and I apologize. I'm all over the map. It's ADD day.
It's all good.
Another thing that resonated when you were telling this story is because you and I don't have a science background, but I got into UX before they called it UX, and we were called new media and webmasters, and like you remember that days.
Oh yes.
They would go, well, we need this, and you wear all these different hats, which it really thinks. That's why I like your story. It really helps your entrepreneurship and all the different hats you have to wear, right? And as a good creative person, that's what we have to do. I'd love to hear, what are some of the things when you're starting out this business that you didn't expect or didn't know, or were like some aha moments being an entrepreneur, that because no one prepares you for it. That's why that webmaster days is the perfect. No one prepares you for that job. When you and I are about the same age, they just drop stuff on your lap because no one knows how to do it. It's the same thing with entrepreneurship. So I'm curious, your thoughts on that. and things you've learned that you didn't expect?
Yeah, just as an entrepreneur, like, I mean, you totally hit it on the head. Like, as an entrepreneur, you're pretty much like a jack of all trades. Well, you have to be that way, right? You have to be able to market. You have to be able to sell. You have to be able to create. You have to be able to do social media, everything, right? And I guess that's what it also kind of inspired me as well, because I kind of want to learn these new things, again, try to do the best that I can at them. Definitely no pro at at social media. I'm no pro at coding and like that. But I mean, I just have to figure it out, and I guess that's the part of like the right brain, left brain type of thing that's going on like constantly that I appreciate. It's something that, I mean, even to this day, it's just like something that I want to just keep on learning, keep on trying to better myself at certain tasks or certain strategies.
So Alex, not to interrupt, because this is great. So doing that as the webmaster, the media master in the agencies, let's call it corporate. You're doing it in the corporate environment that they're just, throwing everything at you. Oh, Alex will figure it out. To when you're doing it for yourself, I'd love to hear the differences between being the corporate guy that's got to do it and the entrepreneur that's got to do it.
Well, I guess from my experience, when I was doing some corporate work, it's like you always have somebody else in mind, or whether it's like the client or like a committee or whatnot, that you have to that you're helping, and you're doing everything you can to help them the best that you can, to the best of your abilities and skills, and as you're kind of learning these different tricks of the trade and trying to make the best product out there that you can for them, right? So that's something that I would say that kind of motivated me in that setting. But and then now in the more of this entrepreneurial space, I'm pretty much my own client now, so I have to do the best that I can, in order for myself to survive. So I guess there's a different motivating factor there, a little bit of a selfish one, but it is still a motivating factor, right? You still have to be able to get lunch somehow.
So especially given that, as an entrepreneur, like to your point, like you have to figure out how to pay for lunch every day. I think that could feel like really high stakes for a lot of people, especially creative just starting out. What resources would you recommend to other creative entrepreneurs who are just getting started on their journey?
So I would say that like the podcasts are definitely like a great source for whether it's like if you need to look at more marketing or more just like e-com. There's a plethora of options that are just like fantastic. You just have to kind of look for what your needs are and dive into a certain podcast and just absorb as much as you can. I would also reach out to other creatives. If there's other creatives that are maybe whether or not they're like in a similar industry or similar type of product or service, just reach out to different creatives. They've gone through some of those hoops, so definitely try to learn from them. Just read up on different articles. It's a little bit hard for me to think of anything very specific without knowing a particular problem at hand. But yeah, there's so many resources out there that you can just check out and and just try to emulate.
For sure. And one thing I think to add on to what you were sharing is that I remember teaching business skills at an art university, and I'm always just like, if you don't know how to do something, literally Google it or YouTube it or just search for the problem you're having. And like 98% of the time, you will have a bunch of resources. So I hear you when you're like, well, I don't know what I would say because I don't know what you're looking for. But I think people just need to get more comfortable with just taking the time to search for what you need. And you can find out a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. Google's the best. YouTube's the best. So
Totally. So, Alex, is there any specific advice you might want to give to a creative who's just starting out, whether or not it's apparel or just visual art in general? what advice would you give any person, a person of any age, who is just trying to get into a more creative life?
But I would say just be truthful to your own creative self. Embrace that inner person, whether it was your 10-year-old self, 16-year-old self, 25-year-old self. Just embrace that person, be true to them, just keep on going and have a very positive outlook. There's so much negativity in the world. It's easy to see the glass, half empty. I always think it's best just to do the best you can and just be positive, with anything that you do.
That's so beautiful, man. It's so true. And thank you for that. I'm notorious on this show, besides asking long questions. I love to get into a creative person's mind and what inspires them. So I'm interested to learn, who inspires you? What do you look up to? And your art style. I love your style. Like, who are some influences, and some odd ones too, would make me happy.
I'd have to say, I can't think of anything really odd, but I would say that Todd McFarlane has been like a huge influence in my creative path. I've always loved his artwork, and then also loved what he's done too. Like, he's been always a supporter of the creatives. He helped start Image, and however controversial it is, but from my perspective, it was something that was inspiring. Another comic book artist, Jim Lee, is also one that's up there as well. And then I would say Picasso is also one that inspires me too, just for being so unique at the time, and just the whole cubism aspect of it is just like, it's just amazing, especially for that time period. Yeah, abstract. Yeah, I hope that's enough.
You are under no obligation to make Chris happy with that question. Alex, this has been super awesome. Where can people find you and StorySpark and get to know you and your products a little bit better?
Yeah, you can always, find me on Instagram at StorySpark. On there, probably the most active on that platform. And then you can always visit storyspark.com, and you can see our entire line. And we have some blog posts, articles too, and we try to make it a nice destination for techies and unique design gift givers. So
How we always end the show is we give you the last word. But before I do, I'm telling everybody, go check out StorySpark. Go follow those links. You won't be disappointed. The clothes and the designs are so cool. So I just want to give an extra shout out to that. So with that, Alex, how we end the show is we always let our guests have the final word. Anything you'd like to say, add, enlighten us, whatever you feel like, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much, Chris and Rick. I really appreciate you taking the time and allowing me to share my thoughts and stories, and also just want to thank your listeners too for listening in, and hopefully everybody's been able to get some value out of my ramblings. So yeah, stay true.
Thank you for joining Rick and myself on another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a Designer Con production. Please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, download and listen to us every place you get your favorite podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Origins, A Creative Journey, all one word. Drop us an email for thoughts, ideas, or maybe somebody you'd like us to interview at dconpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you join us in Las Vegas for DesignerCon, North America's premier annual design convention. All the information can be found, including tickets, at designercon.com. Till then, enjoy your own creative journey.